So, genuine question. Like, is in 4 years, are we looking at like another election? Like, what is Trump going to do to like, is he going to cling to power? Like, are the is the country over as we know it? Like, what is going to happen in your opinion if he wins?
And so she's kind of just like assumed the base is there, and now she's going to the right, and there's a big problems with the base, and the turnout and the vibe is down because of the genocide is clearly one. She said fuck you to everybody to the left of Attila Hun. She's holding hands with Dick Cheney, and like it's not that these people are going to vote for Trump; they're just not going to show up. I think the thing for me is like, first of all, she hasn't given people a reason to believe she should be trusted with the presidency. Like, at the end of the day, they reject Joe Biden. And her mission should have been show a vision for the country that would have been different than Joe Biden, a change election. And the reason why that was necessary is there was a Franklin and Marshall poll that just came out. I can link it to you if you want. But basically, it goes through all this stuff. This is in Pennsylvania, and it's disastrous.
Yeah.
Here, I'll link it to you.
Oh, I got it. I found it. Okay.
Yeah.
Dear readers, I'm okay.
If you scroll down, and the thing that really shocks me is the last time Pennsylvania residents thought their finances had been better than 1 year ago was October 2020.
Yeah, I see that.
So basically, for the entire time Biden has been president, people have been saying, no, my finances are worse off than a year ago. And like that, you can't ignore that. And like Kamala Harris did. And she just basically said, I wouldn't have done anything different than Biden. And that's the message people got. And as that's the message has gotten out, her momentum ended. It stalled completely.
Do you think, and this is crazy because like voters originally said that they weren't going to punish Kamala with Biden's economy.
She hugged him.
She had a blank slate when the swap out first occurred, which was crazy. It was like, I remember looking at polls being like, that's what a gift. What a gift to the Kamala Harris campaign.
This is something like when she first dropped out, I know you and I were like completely open to her. And I feel like that was a sign, we were representative in our communities of like the larger youth progressive wing of the parties where we were like, okay. And then when Walz was picked, we were like, okay. And like, we were all chomping at the bit, ready to, jump on, become K-hivers. And the reality is, she went into the DNC. She made that disastrous right-wing speech. Ezra Klein of the New York Times, he did an analysis of it, and he said it was the most right-wing Democratic nomination speech he'd ever heard. Yeah, and it was. And that's when the momentum stopped. And all the momentum she was seeing, all the movement in the polls that got her ahead of Trump was young people, was, progressives coming home, was, and a lot of people think of this like ideology in a totally wrong way. They think of like, if somebody says they're moderate, it means they're a neoliberal centrist. And that's not what it is. It's more of a statement of your own like persona or your own like feelings about like time
and time again ballot measures have consistently proven that the most popular thing in the heartland, in the Midwest, in the Sun Belt, no matter where you go, is a lifeless, faceless, progressive ballot measure not associated with a Democrat directly. Americans love voting for instituting full-blown communism in the form of a progressive ballot measure, but fucking despise the Democrats or despise the Republicans as well, depending on where you're looking at. So, yes, the idea that like the average independent moderate who fancies themselves to be in directly the center of all of these issues is a silly one. And ironically enough, that's why I was excited about the Tim Walz prospect, because I thought that would actually force the Democratic Party's hand into putting forward or at least defending a progressive message. Because Tim Walz, with a one-person majority in the state Senate in Minnesota, actually signed into law many of these measures that were considered radical by the Republican Party and maybe even radical by some in the Democratic coalition.
Well, here's the thing that's really interesting about that is notice how none of the attacks on Tim Walz were about the policies he passed in Minnesota.
Yeah. It was about fucking how he has a fake dog or how he abuses his son or all this shit. Exactly. They originally laughed and were like, oh, what a stupid mistake that they went with radical Tim Walz. He's a communist. And none of that shit actually worked even a little bit. But the problem is the Democrats actually fucking moved away from that. And it's very frustrating, especially when you have one of your most popular policies in a sea of boring neoliberal bullshit be that you are going to tackle price gougers at the federal level with pre-existing law that already is out there.
Has is the most popular thing.
Yes, and it's very frustrating that they are not. It's very frustrating that they're not fucking. They didn't push that hard enough. Even though Donald Trump kept saying that's like Venezuela. And the only thing that happened to that policy was that it grew in popularity in that process. It literally became more popular despite the New York Times op-eds about fucking how, this is impossible to implement and Kamala is just doing this or Republicans consistently attacking it. Yeah, the moderate voters are all over the ideological map. You want to explain this to people?
So basically, I popped up from my camera. Basically,
go
this
ahead.
is a
I'm going to go pee while you explain this. I've heard
Yeah.
this a million times, but let's hear it.
This is a study from a few years ago, but it still holds true. Overwhelmingly, so this is basically a political, compass with tilted on the edge. So like the top and the left squares are like the left wing economics positions. And then being more pro-immigration is the bottom and the left. Okay. So what you'll see, and these are people who call themselves moderates, and they were all given an ideological test. And one of the things you'll find really interesting about here is the overwhelming majority of people who consider themselves moderate are very left wing. And then the 2/3 to like 70% of people are left wing economically. Almost no one is a libertarian who considers themselves. So like libertarian square is the bottom square. There's almost no one there. And actually, there are some people who call themselves moderate who are extremely right wing, but it's very rare. So basically, when you're running on, when you see people saying like, oh, a lot of people are moderate, but that actually that's a label that's not connected to ideology. It's not like a lot of people are Joe Manchin. That's just not the case. And so that we've known this for a very, very long time, that self-described ideology doesn't describe what people support. And we can have real world tests of this. Like, for example, in Florida, over 60% of people voted to restore felon voting rights. Over 60% of people voted for a $15 minimum wage. At the same time, Donald Trump was winning by like 8 points. They were getting 60% for the $50. So people are not voting for these candidates as ideological like decisions. It's a lot different than that. And so when Kamala Harris goes to the right on these issues, what she's actually doing is not really winning over a population that exists. The people that are like, I love Liz Cheney are not real. The people that love Liz Cheney are actually liberals who appreciate her shitting on Trump.
Yes.
So these are anti-Trump liberals, and they see a Republican spitting in Trump's face, and they like that. It's not like a moderate Republican who loves Liz Cheney.
She does not have. I mean,
Nikki Haley crushed.
Nikki Haley is the greatest example of this. Nikki Haley is the perfect example of this. Nikki Haley ran against Donald Trump. Nikki Haley said, whoever swaps their candidate first wins this election. Okay, but when it was Biden versus Trump, Nikki Haley literally is pro-Trump. She's voting for Trump. Nikki Haley voters are also voting for Trump. A lot of Nikki Haley voters in open primaries were actually Democrats who also either registered for the Republican Party to vote for Nikki Haley or are also, going to end up, if they were Republicans, are going to end up voting for Donald Trump. Going after this Nikki Haley constituency is so fucking stupid. And that's precisely what the Democratic Party has done. So
like for me, that's the kind of thing that I look at where I do like a sanity check. Like, okay, is it possible that the polls are wrong and that Harris is like could win? The answer is yes. I think whenever you're looking at polls from a scientific perspective, you should look at that and recognize they have a margin of error and it's possible. And then when we start to think about like, okay, historically, why did the polls get it wrong? Why were they underestimating Trump in both 2016 and 2020? And the answer is a certain type of low propensity Republican voter turning out and being hard to poll. And the question I keep asking myself is, does it seem like, with the evidence available, that those people are showing up again? And does Kamala Harris have a commensurate like rise in low propensity Democrat
Or wait,
voters?
hold on. Or where they're showing up. That's important too. I think that like my argument or my vibe overall on this is that there is a very high likelihood that Trump can win. I still think Kamala Harris is like I put
think
her
she's an underdog at this point.
I put Kamala Harris like marginally in a better shot than Donald Trump, because I do think that the polls, at least pollsters from what I have seen, have slammed at least 2 points in Trump's favor in an effort not to repeat the mistakes of 2016. And even Trump overperformed the polls in 2020 as well, not to the same degree, but like he obviously overperformed polls in 2016. And he also overperformed the polls in 2020 as well.
He actually
so this time I think pollsters are like literally fucking slamming 2 points no matter what.
It's interesting. It's interesting you say that. It's interesting you say that because like he did overperform the polls more in 2020 than he did in 2016. He was just further behind Biden in the polls. So like the polls had Biden up like 8. He ends up winning by 3. Well, that's a 5-point error, but he was so far ahead in the polls that he still won, right? Whereas in 2016, Hillary was up, 3 or 4 in the polls, and then she ends up losing the close states. So she loses, and the polls were wrong like by 2 points, right? So the 2 points were more relevant because of where they were, like how the numbers were looking. But 2020 was actually worse. So the question we have to ask ourselves is: have the pollsters figured out how to poll the electorate that supports Donald Trump in general elections correctly? And I don't think we can know that until the actual election happens, which is why I have any. If I thought that they had done that, then I would say the polls are accurate. But the reason I think, if you're betting to me, I think that it's much more likely that they got it wrong again, because it's very hard to like get these people.
Yeah, no, it's notoriously difficult, which is why I think they're just straight slamming 2 extra points. That's what I'm saying.
I don't see any evidence that they're just doing that shy Trump adjustment. Like, so it's funny you mentioned this, because back in 2015, when Jeremy Corbyn was running for the first time as the nominee for Labor in a general election, and the polls were all very much in favor of the Tories because they had this shy Tory weighting on it. And I was one of those people that looked into it and said, oh no, I think Corbyn's going to massively overperform. And he ended up he almost won the election outright. But there was a massive polling error against the Tories in 2015 because of that shy Tory weighting that was being applied. I don't think I see any shy Republican weighting being applied.
No, I don't think I don't think it's shy Republicans. I don't think it's a matter of shy Republicans. I think it's a matter of like it not being able to predict low and mid propensity voters accurately. So they're just like throwing that on the board. Like they're just weighing it in that direction so that they don't come short again. That's what I think is going on, because I don't think no Trump supporter is shy at this point. Okay, there's no.
That's what I.
Yeah, they're loud as fuck. Okay, they love Donald Trump. They love saying they love Donald Trump. They're calling him daddy. They're fucking insane over there. I don't think it's the
they're
shy.
Saying spank me. Yeah. I know.
Yeah, I don't think it's the shy Trump voters necessarily. I think it's more so like, how many of the fucking crackhead constituency that like, how many of the podcasters, like podcast watchers, divorced dads galore, are actually going to turn out on election day and go out and vote because they're legitimately fucking, they think Kamala Harris is a Marxist or whatever the fuck they believe. You don't think that there's a Trump popular vote victory where he still loses the Electoral College though?
That would only happen if she managed to hold Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And I think any election path that requires Michigan to be held by Harris is very suspect. I think people really are underestimating the damage that has been done by Gaza because they don't want to deal with it until it actually happens. They're like in denial about it. They're like, no, they won't vote for the Muslim ban guy. And they just kind of turn off their brain and they don't look into the data at all. And if you look at I think Biden won by, how much did he win Michigan by, chat? I was gonna say 80,000, but I don't remember.
I think it was 100,000.
Okay, 100,000. Like there are, like what, 300,000 Arabs and Muslim voters in Michigan, like.
Yeah, and I think they voted for Biden by like 70%. Yeah, 70.
Yeah. So that's like that, and that's the entire gap. I mean, I guess it's possible. I mean, the path would be that she does move the numbers among white voters closer to, like, she does even better than Biden does with white voters overall. I find that hard to believe. I legitimately find that like almost unbelievable. The idea that Joe Biden would do worse with white voters than Harris would do.
I think that the math comes down to white women. Like, I think that's what it comes down to. Like, are white women finally not going to vote for Trump as the majority? And I don't know where that is right now. But I think if Kamala Harris secures white women as the majority voting bloc, then she has a chance of winning the election. The problem, however, is that when you look at Arizona polling, where abortion is on the ballot, when you look at Florida polling, where abortion is also on the ballot, well, I guess Florida is a unique case in and of itself.
Florida is like, I think the Republicans are up 10 in the early vote right now.
Yeah, Florida doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter, but like
that's crazy.
In midterms, and in other special elections, like obviously abortion being on the ballot has greatly favored the Democratic Party in terms of turnout. In the general election, it's a little bit different than midterms. It's a little bit different than it's obviously very different than like special elections. I think that like not Florida, but Arizona as an example is more important to see if like this kind of additional turnout specifically on abortion, does that allow Kamala Harris a benefit, an electoral boost? And I think that for a lot of white women in red states, I do not know if they will be able to shake off white supremacy as being their primary motivator here, where they can very selfishly go, yeah, I want to protect abortion, and also I'm not going to punish the guy who took it away from me and my daughters, and then turn around and still vote for Donald Trump gladly.
I feel like one of the problems that we have is that the Democratic Party hasn't like drawn those lines, like, because they want to do this thing where they like kiss Republican ass, but they don't want to, like 95% of Republicans are going to vote for Trump. And Democrats don't deal with that, like that problem. Like they don't go to the voters and say the Republicans are Trump supporters, and Trump supporters are wrong. They're scared to say that. Yeah. Whereas on the other side, the Republicans are like, these are criminals over there. All Democrats should go to hell, and that creates a certain like distance from the consequences of the Republican Party's policies. She doesn't want to attack the Supreme Court. Like, remember, she was on that town hall and she was asked about the Supreme Court getting expanded, and she said we should study it. Well,
oh my God. Oh, that was so bad.
They already studied it. Biden did an executive order in 2001. They published a report, like, I think it was even early this year, about studying the Supreme Court reform. And they came up with the idea of like term limits or something. And so she's basically just running on studying it again.
Yeah, no, she has concepts of a plan. That's her concepts of a plan shit. Like Kamala Harris is like she always does this. She used to do this in 2019. We used to make fun of it, where she would be like, we're going to begin to start thinking about the steps that we must take in the future as a prospect arises. It's like, what the fuck are you saying? Like, that's not an answer. You're just dancing around the fucking issue.
And I think the reason why it's bad is a number of things. First of all, it keeps the Republican Party like free and clear from the consequences of their policies, like on abortion, overturning abortion. The second thing is it doesn't give Democrats, it doesn't like force Democratic politicians to take public positions on court reform. So even if she does win and we do get a trifecta, we're not getting court reform because they didn't prepare the party for it. They didn't make it, they didn't run on it. So they're not going to suddenly like come and do this big radical reformation, so it's not possible to reform it. And the Democratic base voters are not equipped with the knowledge of knowing who's to blame. So regular people aren't going to figure that out either. So you're kind of like expecting people to be like super educated about, who's to blame for who in 30 years of Supreme Court precedent in history, but also not blame Harris for not having a clear plan. So people are supposed to be educated, not want a plan to fix it, but then ignore the fact that there's no plan. It is an incoherence. And this is a problem with Harris, is she wasn't challenged in a primary. She wasn't forced to like come out and make promises and give concessions to various groups to win a primary election that are in the Democratic Party and kind of shore up her base. Yeah. And so she's kind of just like assumed the base is there, and now she's going to the right, and there's a big problems with the base, and the turnout and the vibe is down because of, you know, the genocide is clearly one. She said fuck you to everybody to the left of Attila Hun. She's holding hands with Dick Cheney. And like, it's not that these people are going to vote for Trump; they're just not going to show up.
Yeah, no, that's my
theory of the case.
No, okay. So we're in agreement there. I'm like, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I don't even think she's done enough fear mongering against Donald Trump, which is kind of crazy to say. Like, I don't think that she has actively communicated what
she agrees with his immigration policy. Except for that's the
major issue. That is exactly the major issue here. Like, one of the things that has made me so angry in the way that the Democratic Party has presented immigration as like they are going to be the border, they're going to be the border party, is so fucking stupid. Not because you're making a concession that like immigrants constitute a national security threat, which is unique in the history of the Democratic Party, at least in contemporary history. This is a unique thing that the Democratic Party has given ground to. Okay. And that makes voters in your own base go, wait, what the fuck? Okay, so I guess we're for the border wall. All right, well, the other guy has been pro border wall always, and you just now look like a flip flopper. But beyond that, I think that it is a terrible place to. It's a terrible way to communicate a winning message. Because now you can't even bring up how Donald Trump is an extremist on the fucking border. They are genuinely, I think, fearful that if they bring up Donald Trump's insane anti-immigrant policies as a massive problem, because they saw that one fucking poll that said like 60% want mass deportations, they're now stuck with this idea that like if we tell people that that's going to happen, like that people are going to run in and set up concentration camps once Trump is president, that everyone's going to go, oh, I love that.
Well, first
and they're not even actively communicating how fucking devastating that will look like for the humanity of these supposedly 20 million people that have been living in your fucking neighborhoods, that work at jobs that you don't see, that you take for granted. But then also the economic issues that come along with that as well. Like all of these, a litany of problems. And they're not actively separating themselves and positioning themselves against the Republican Party's policies on the matter by simply saying, oh, they're ineffective. They're not effective enough to be the immigrant mutilator party. We will be the immigrant destroyer party. It's very stupid.
Well, I think the main thing is, first of all, they never care what issue polls say. Okay, like, 70% of people support a public option for healthcare. They're not running on it. Why not? I mean, because they don't care. They don't care to run on things that are popular. They are that has nothing to do with what they're trying to do. So why are they doing this like right-wing immigration ploy? It's the same thing that Obama tried. He was the porter in chief. They tried this whole strategy of run to the right and then we'll compromise with the Republicans. Biden tried it. He said, we'll do Trump's immigration policy. And they said, fuck you. We want mass deportations on top of it, and the main issue that we have here is that the Democratic Party is too far right. And they created this immigration disaster because they maintained Trump's policies on Cuba and Venezuela, where they did economic sanctions and they destroyed these economies and they sent millions of refugees to the United States to flee these situations that are created by our foreign policy. And Joe Biden is a psychopath, warmonger, neocon on foreign policy. And so he likes it. He wants to have Venezuela's economy destroyed. He wants Cuba's economy destroyed.
For sure.
And he doesn't want to pursue the policy. Like, they had a trifecta. They could have pursued some sort of policy. But again, he loves the filibuster. So these disasters exist. and they exist because of the policies that the Democratic Party supported, and now there are consequences for supporting it. And the solution that they've come up with is adopt Donald Trump's 2016 campaign. There's no way that people who are racist against immigrants are going to choose Kamala Harris over Donald Trump, no matter what Kamala Harris says. If Kamala Harris set up a death camp for immigrants, they would still vote for Trump over her.
He has made a significant investment in the last 4 years to bolster their early vote, right? So what you're seeing a lot of right now across a lot of the swing states for the GOP is the Republicans are performing better in the early vote, as you would expect with that type of investment.
So you're saying cannibalization. You're saying that they're cannibalizing what would have been day of votes.
And I'm not saying this is all that's going to happen, but and look, you can say it's copium, but it's reality. They are cannibalizing day of votes.
I don't think it's cope. I think it's a reasonable argument.
No, I'm not saying that it's again. But we're all in the same camp here. We don't know what's going to happen, but I think this is information that people should have because it is true, and it's something important to look at.
So the main piece of data that I have to like counter that point is just like when we look at the polls, they start to have like, now that we're really close to the election, they ask you, have you voted yet? Right. Mm-hmm. And so you have like the early vote section of the poll, and then you have the people that are going to vote. And we see in the like are planning on voting in the future a big Trump advantage still. Now I'd have to like really drill down and look at that to see if we could definitively say. But what I would say overall is just like looking at what we have available to us today, a combination of like our vibes, the data, the total data, like what Kamala Harris needs to be at to be assured of win. She's not in that zone. She's in the Donald Trump can win zone.
I mean, for sure.
That's where we're at. I could talk about this if you want. So like just very quickly, we have a high propensity versus low propensity. What we've seen is a shift that's been very unusual. Like for almost the entire political history, the Republicans were the party of higher propensity voters, meaning lower turnout election equals higher likelihood of Republican win.
Rich voters, wealthier voters.
Yeah, because like the more educated you are, the more money you make, which are not always linked, but in general they are. They're not totally though. The more likely you are to vote. So like people who make $1 million a year, they have a 99.9% turnout rate. So so the richer you are, the more you vote. And so historically that was always advantageous for Republicans, lower turnout, special elections, midterms, Republican advantage. But with Trump, there's been kind of like a declassification of the parties, like where we're no longer, we don't, how much money you make doesn't tell what party you are anymore. Whereas before it used to be wealthier equals Republican. Now it's not the case. And so what we're seeing is like, and I describe it as like upscale voters, like, or class conscious voters or status conscious voters are more Democrat. And then you have like, I don't know, white trashy or trashy people that would think, who own a F-350, they're not poor, right? But they have a certain, like, they have a trashy aesthetic. They have truck nuts. That's not a poor person thing. That's just like an aesthetic thing, right? And so we're seeing that. And with Trump, he does really well with these low propensity voters that are conservative.
Yes.
And so in the midterms, now that we have those high propensity voters, those teachers' pets voters are going Democrat because they don't like the way that Trump makes them look. They don't like the way that he makes the country look, and they're voting as like a status thing against Trump. That means Democrats are going to do way better in midterms and way better in specials than they did before. Now we have the general election for the president. This is the highest turnout election. So the question of who's performing better with the low propensity voters of their side. And I think that it's very, at least in my opinion, very clear that Donald Trump is doing much better with the low propensity Republican conservative type than Kamala Harris is with like the young college student.
So, genuine question, like, is in 4 years, are we looking at like another election? Like, what is Trump going to do to, like, is he going to cling to power? Like, are the like, is the country over as we know it? Like, what is going to happen in your opinion if he wins?
Well, I mean, the president is incredibly powerful, and this is something that liberals don't like to hear. So he can do tremendous damage, and obviously with the Supreme Court already being radically right wing, if we also lose the Senate, then you're probably going to see a couple retirements, and then the 6-3 majority will be locked in a little bit harder. I think that the main thing we need to be focusing on is like getting the biggest landslide we can in the midterm. I think, Donald Trump is going to do some dumbass fucking shit. People are going to hate his guts. His policies are very unpopular. And when it's just him standing on the stage, I think that, and not on the ballot, I think we have an opportunity to organize against him.
You're gonna see a lot of woke liberals like remember when the Democratic Party was like abolish ICE?
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's not even a radical opinion, because ICE was fucking created because of Bush.
Yeah, and also,
why are
people forget
ICE
like
is some sort of a radical fucking position.
People forget. Yes,
the Patriot Act is new.
You're absolutely correct. From like ICE and Department of Homeland Security is relatively new, and a lot of people have forgotten that it is a relatively new thing. And they take it for granted, but I'm just simply stating that like Kamala Harris running on Medicare for all, or even voting on what I like to call like the most progressive messaging bills of all time, whenever there's like a fucking Republican in charge and holds the Senate and the House, is exactly what the Democrats did. The Democrats were way more radical under the Trump administration than they actually ended up becoming when they were actually in power.
The one thing I would say to people, like, if you're lived up and you're like, if Donald Trump wins, it's the end of the world. I wouldn't say that. Like, what I would say is it would obviously be a massive repudiation of neoliberalism. It would be a massive repudiation of interventionism, of warmongering, and I think a lot of it would be an opportunity for all of us to kind of like shake off the fleas that are the last 4 years of this incredibly damaging war in the Middle East that's expanding out of control.
This is where I disagree with you 100%. I think it's an opportunity for organizing for sure. You're right about that 100%.
Well, okay, are you saying that you think the Democratic Party is going to go to the right? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes.
Okay, here's the thing about that. There's no such thing as a Democratic Party. It's not like it's not like a party in Europe with a central list and they have the opportunity to discipline people and kick it out. All the Democratic Party is a brand name and a spot on the ballot. Whatever people vote for is what the Democratic Party is. So we have the opportunity to elect more progressive candidates in an open field, in an open primary. I don't know what is going to happen. Could someone more conservative get elected? Yeah. Could someone more to the left get elected? Yeah. Bernie Sanders was nowhere, and he came out of nowhere in 2015. Nobody saw that coming.
Yeah, but also Bernie Sanders.
The idea that we should just say, if Harris loses, it's going to also mean that we're going to turn even more right wing.
No, the only thing I'm pointing to is post 2016. Look at post 2016. Look at 2020. Look at where we're at now. The Democratic Party only has one speed, and that's going right.
Well, we lost. We lost the debate. We lost the vote. We were close, and we got a lot of progressive people in office, and some of those people have lost, and some new people have joined, and a lot of issues that would have never been considered, like Medicare for all or all these other things, even opposing Israel at all, would never have been considered.
I don't think you're right about that. I just do not foresee a future where the Democratic Party goes, well, I learned my lessons from this last electoral defeat. They're going to do the exact same thing that they did in 2016.
Not. Oh, no, the people in power now are ideological neoliberal freaks, and they're going to try to hold on to power. And it'll be our job to throw them out and have no sentiment and to go after all of them as viciously as we can and throw them the fuck out and try to get a actually decent social democratic platform put together where this generation takes the lead from the rapidly dying boomers. If we let Nancy Pelosi keep power, if we let all these fucking freaks that are supporting the genocide of Gaza keep power, that'll be on us. That's the reality. Is like this cycle, we never got a chance to speak. It was no one ran against Joe Biden, and then it was handed to Kamala, and none of us got the chance to speak. If Kamala loses, the one thing we will get is a chance to speak in the Democratic Party. Maybe we'll lose. I'm not going to give up
I think you're
before we even do
hopeful.
it.
I don't think that that's going to happen.
You have to be a socialist. A socialist has to be irrationally optimistic, fundamentally in our core. If you don't believe that a better future is possible, then you're no longer a socialist. You are a liberal. Doomerism is the last stage of your liberalism.
No, I think I'll keep advocating for the same things that I've been advocating for. I'll keep trying to organize. I'll keep trying to build some kind of counter momentum within the Democratic Party. But having said that, I have no confidence that the Democratic Party will go down.
Let me give you one vignette.
I think they would. I think they would rather blow up the ship than allow.
Of course they would.
Allow any kind of like progressive.
Of course they would. Well, then we don't let them. Well, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about.
Hold on, she hasn't lost yet, guys. Come on.
Okay, yeah, if she wins, well, then that's probably the worst outcome, because when she wins, they're going to do their damnedest to kick out every single person who ever said the word Free Palestine in the history of the planet, and they're going to be trying to get Liz Cheney registered as the next senator from New York City, or from New York.
Why is she going to put I don't want a Republican in the cabinet.
But the donors do.
I think I'm going to be honest with you. I think if they lose... Mike, I think if they lose, they're going to do the same thing.
Okay, well, then you're really just saying the Democratic Party is lost. But I agree with you, but I'm not going to let them have it, because I know something you don't know. The voters don't like them that much. Like, the voters don't really give a shit about these people.
I know, but I think this last election cycle has basically solidified that position that, like, they don't give a fuck that the voters don't like them.
Give a fuck. That's our job, to make them give a fuck by throwing them out. I mean, and make them scared. You know, does it going to happen overnight? No, I don't think it'll happen overnight. Like, look at Sean Fain. The old UAW leadership was literally taking bribes from Stellantis executives to fuck over their workers. It was impossible to run for leadership in the UAW. It was locked down with the most corrupt motherfuckers connected to organized crime, and were anti-left, anti-communist, corrupt pieces of shit taking bribes to fuck over their workers, create two tiers of worker, to get rid of their pensions. And what happened is that the Bernie Sanders people, they went into UAW with Sean, and they said, we're going to bring back the UAW back to its roots. And they won a narrow election, partially using the graduate student voters of the UAW, and they took it over, and then they got the best contract they've gotten in decades. And the left in the UAW is leading the charge. They forced Joe Biden to show up at a picket line, because they said, if you don't, we're not going to endorse you. So he fucking cravenly had to show up with his tail between his legs. What I'm saying is, things that we think are not possible suddenly become possible. So your first mission as a leftist is to stop playing the dumb liberal game of blinkering what you think can happen. We have no fucking idea what's going to happen. I remember I ran for office in 2014 before you people were even alive. Okay. And what happened? I was considered to be a left-wing crazy, and I was like a progressive. I wasn't even a socialist at that point, openly. And I was like running on, I'm going to start a small business incubator at Lehigh University and shit. Like, this is, obviously I wanted to, tax frackers, and I wanted a moratorium on wells and stuff, all sorts of stuff that was relatively small. And Bernie Sanders and the progressive movement blew up, and we now have a totally new idea of what it is, what you can be to be a left wing.
What you're talking about only happens if, I think, in the way that the way that everything is set up, I think that only happens if there is a Bernie style figure running up against a Hillary Clinton style figure that is like an institutional relic that everyone despises, that has like a litany of some valid and some conspiracy theories launched against them. And then you have like a progressive beacon that is ideologically committed and has a strong track record of being a progressive fighter. And then there's still mistakes that Bernie Sanders made in terms of like,
by being too soft.
Yeah. Not fighting hard enough. This sort of stuff. Like, I don't disagree with you on that front at all. I think, win or lose, the Democratic Party is still going to be incredibly hostile, not resistant, incredibly hostile to that sort of progressive momentum. That won't stop me from pushing for it. I
Well,
I
you
have
never
my
win
own.
feeling like you're gonna lose. You know, you gotta like have at least the elan to be like, fuck them. You know, like, and the other thing is, we're never going to see a situation. It's not gonna, if they can see it coming, they're gonna fucking sabotage it. You know, like that's the obvious. It's
Yeah.
going to be something we don't expect, and events are gonna happen.
Well,
you know,
events
that
are
we
speaking of
don't
events that
know.
are going to happen. I have to
Is
leave right
Israel
now
bombing Iran?
because Israel is, according to reports, bombing Iran. So what that means is what that